Hey everybody, Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again tonight. So it's the end of the world here in Indiana. We had super cold temperatures for about a week, wind chills down in the -20s, and now we're getting an ice storm. I think the weatherman said we could get up to a half an inch of ice tonight, but the weatherman's never wrong when you want him to be wrong. He always seems like he's wrong when you want him to be right. That's just my experience. So we're doing general question and answer tonight. If you guys have questions, just go ahead and type them in. If you're on, let us know if you're on and where you're from and what's going on. And if you have questions, let me know, and we will just go through and answer them. We have a few things specifically that we're going to talk about today. We have a BOC and MUC shortage that people are freaking out about. So we're going to talk a little bit about white muscle disease. We're going to talk a little bit about selenium and vitamin E, what it means and what you can do. And then we'll kind of get into things as we go. So let's just jump right in. We actually had a message that was on here before we even got started. Uh, from Mortimer. He wants to know, he says he's got two ewes and three lambs under 3 weeks old, and that they have always given the ewes sweet cob for a treat. Is this a danger for lambs with undeveloped rumens? So, some of you may be asking, what in the world is sweet cob? So, sweet cob is a feed mix that is a mix of actual corn cobs and corn. And what it is it's a little bit different because they generally will harvest the corn when it's a little bit younger and the sugar content is a little higher. So it is going to seem a little sweeter to the animals. So not necessarily dangerous depending on how it's ground. Um, there are some imbalances, and it would depend on how fast you're feeding this to your youngsters and how well adapted they are to eating it. So, if they're on a crete feed most of the time and they're used to eating, it's not necessarily going to be as big of a deal. The thing that you have to remember, not only with the sweet cob, but you also have to remember when it comes down to just general whole shell corn or crack corn in general, is that the calcium and phosphorus ratio is generally off in those. It's generally skewed to where that corn's going to have much more phosphorus in it than it has calcium. And as we've talked about at length before, that calcium to phosphorus imbalance can cause problems, especially with developing urinary calculi in your males. So, we always want our calcium to be about twice as much as our phosphorus, especially for our males, our castrated males, specifically that we're talking about here. So, if you're feeding something only like this, you really need to be cautious and make sure that you're keeping on track with that. So, a little bit here and there for them as a treat, not that big of a deal. But if that's the only form of feed that they're getting, you could potentially be setting yourself up for problems. Now, we talk at length about the calcium and phosphorus imbalance. It doesn't necessarily affect the females as much as it affects the males. As a matter of fact, females need that phosphorus, especially for things like milk production. Do females get urinary calculi? Yes, the females do get urinary calculi. It's a specific problem in the way that the male anatomy is formed as compared to the way the female anatomy is formed. So, yes, they do both get urinary calculi. They both can get urinary calculi. But generally, when you're going to see problems that result in death, that's going to be your castrated males first and foremost, and then your intact adult or juvenile males. a second, but it is an issue. So we have some things in place that we utilize to get around that. We talk about adding or having a feed that has ammonium chloride in it. Ammonium chloride is a salt. It helps to dissolve some of those stones, then make them either small enough that they can pass them or just eliminate them altogether. And then, of course, we want to keep a good watch on our calcium and phosphorus imbalance. The other thing that we've talked about before is if you have really hard water, if you live in an area where you've got high iron content, things like that, um, I advise that you put a filter on your hose on your water line. Go to the Walmart and get yourself an RV filter or something like that. We want to try to take as much of that out of the water as possible. Having that high iron content can compete with other minerals such as copper and things like that that they may need when it comes to your goats, and it's just a good idea to get that out of there. So that's what I have to say about that. The other thing that I would tell you is, CD&T vaccine is important. It's important for all of your animals. C and D, the Clostridium type C and D, a lot of the old timers you may hear them talk about, or different regions within the United States or around the world, you may hear them refer to that as overeating disease. And the reason that they say this is Clostridium type C and D can rear its ugly head. It can only one time. If you've never had an animal get out and get into a bag of feed before, congratulations. But it does happen from time to time, and if it hasn't happened to you yet, it could happen in the future. And vaccinating against Clostridium type C and D is just one of those things that we consider a must do on our farm. So we vaccinate for Clostridium type C and D and tetanus. So CD and T is what that is. So, anytime we're going to have animals on exposure to grain, free choice grain, anything like that, we worry about that. And so it's just something that you would want to cover your bases with. Good question, Mortimer. Thank you for that. All right. So our friend Baker Coffee Maker, how long should it take for a placenta to come out? And if it doesn't within that time frame, what do you do? Different schools of thought on this. Now, when I was a kid growing up on the farm that I worked on, they would go in and they would manually pull it. They would reach in and pull that placenta. When you get in there, it feels almost like a button, and you could grab it and twist it and usually pull it out. Different veterinarians advise against this. So, Dr. Kennedy always advised against this from Pipestone Veterinary. He always said, hey, it'll come out on its own. You may need to treat with some form of antibiotic in order to protect that animal. I tend to be on the side that I will usually let it come out on its own. Usually within a couple of days, it will come out. A couple routes of prophylactic medication administration that you may consider. You may consider a tetracycline bolus tablet inserted directly into the sheep, or you may need to utilize, depending on how bad it is and how long it's in there, you may need to utilize some other types of antibiotics, and that would be something that you could talk to your veterinarian about. Generally speaking, it's going to come out within hours. Although I did have one ewe this year out of about, I don't know, 30 that had retained placenta that stayed in for a day and a half before it finally came out. So there is no exact science. Do I personally advise going in there and pulling it? I don't, but people do. So just remember, anytime you're going into your sheep or your goat, be it that you're delivering a baby due to a difficult birth, you're doing some kind of examination, whatever, we always like to chase that examination with the tetracycline bolus tablet, and it looks like a large vitamin. I believe it's 250 milligrams of tetracycline in tablet form, and we will actually insert that up into mom to help cover our base from any damage that she may have incurred when we had to manually manipulate her. So, good question. I know it can be stressful. If you get a chance here on the forum tonight, let me know how long it's been. I would be interested to see that. Thank you for the question. Our favorite name on our group, that's a repeat follower, been with us for quite a long time, Vets Grow Fuzzy Butt Farm. It's just a great name, folks. Vets Grow Fuzzy Butt Farm. It's just fun to say. Uh, so thanks for being with us again. We appreciate it. All right. Cold in Iowa. Yeah, I know. We're all just getting slammed, aren't we? It is something. And now I think next week, at least here, they're saying we're going to be up like near 50 degrees. So you know what's going to happen, right? We're going to go from really cold to really warm, and then then you get mud, and then you get impactions, and you get all kinds of other stuff. So hoof rot, hoof scald, this is always something that comes up this time of year. Hoof rot is a complicated thing. It's actually a couple of bacteria. They work kind of together in this evil agreement that they have with one another. Generally, when it comes to hoof rot, what ends up happening is the sheep or the goat gets some kind of an injury to the hoof, which allows one bacteria to come in, and then once it gets settled in, the other one comes in. These are nasty bacteria. They are what we call anaerobic bacteria. So when we think aerobic, we think oxygen with oxygen. When we think anaerobic, without oxygen, these are anaerobic bacteria that get in. So there is a hoof rot vaccine that is out there. It is for cattle. But there are a lot of sheep and goat producers that are utilizing this for their sheep and goats. We have not done it yet, but we don't have that big of a hoof rot problem on our farm. So if we get any kind of issues, usually during the winter with hoof rot, it would be because one of our animals has actually had some kind of trauma to their foot. Maybe they stepped on something and got an injury. And so now you're getting a wound that's opened up, and they're potentially setting themselves up for problems with that. We think that the Naylor's Hoof and Heel works really good. We've packed hoof rot with copper sulfate dissolved in gauze, and actually packed the gauze up into the hoof and wrapped it with Coban. And then injectable antibiotics. I think injectable antibiotics work well. Draxin is an injectable long-acting antibiotic that tends to work well. The Draxin, for those of you that don't use it because of the price, there is a generic Draxin that's out there now. It's not cheap, but it's not the 300 and something dollars a bottle that you were once paying for the brand name Draxin. So something to keep in mind with this weather changing. I always tell people, if you're going to lay your hands on your animals while you're out there, just go ahead and look at them. And when it comes to limping, you want to act as quickly as possible, because that animal could be limping because they just twisted it, something like that. They could be limping because they've got something stuck in there. And if that's the case, it's a quick fix. You pull it out and they're usually good to go. If you can get a handle on hoof rot before it gets full blown, your outcomes are going to be significantly better. So I always tell my kids, when I'm training my kids to work with our animals, if they lay their hands on an animal, we're checking things. We're checking the eyelids is the big one. I'm like, hey, if you've got your hands on them and you're holding their head because you're doing something, you better be checking the eyelids. We're checking that FOMACHA score, because why not, right? You're there, you got your hands on them, you might as well do it. So proactive is the way to be, especially when we get going with our animals with the weather changes. Sullivan County, Indiana. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Emily Hathaway. Hello from Trafalgar. Okay, good deal. I know exactly where you're at. As a matter of fact, we have our border collie who doesn't like herding sheep, is from down that way. So very nice. Thank you for joining us. Karen wants to know, what's the difference between LA 200 and penicillin? Oh, wow, that is a complex question. So I'll boil it down into as simple as I can make it for everybody. So there are different classes of antibiotics. All antibiotic classes work differently. Some antibiotics will destroy the cell wall of the bacteria. Other antibiotics will actually get inside of the bacteria and hurt the way that it replicates. Some of them will get in there and basically just make a mess to where the DNA doesn't work properly anymore, and it will destroy them. So when penicillin first came out, it was a game changer. And penicillin works in a very unique way, as do all antibiotics, but penicillin works in a very unique way because bacterial cell walls are different than human cell walls. Bacterial cell walls actually have almost like a coating that's around them where our cells don't. And so what that bacteria, or excuse me, what that penicillin does is it goes in there and it damages that bacterial cell wall, and by doing so it destroys it. Things like La200, which is a tetracycline, work in different ways when it comes down to cell or bacteria multiplication replication. There are different types of bacteria. When we study bacteria, we call some of them what we call gram positive and some of them what we call gram negative. Penicillin will work really good on some of those, but it won't work really good on others. Where tetracycline at one point in time worked really good on all of them. Now, as time has progressed, we've started to see antibiotic resistance to things like penicillin, tetracycline, and so we've gotten heavier and heavier duty antibiotics as we've gone along. So, in a nutshell, I would tell you that penicillin will work really good against some bacteria, but then others it won't work very well against at all. And the veterinarians usually won't get in the deep weeds with you about, oh, well, penicillin works good for gram positive because people are like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. So when it comes to infections like mastitis and staph infections and things that generally tend to cause mastitis, penicillin tends to work pretty good for those. When it comes to infections like pneumonia or hoof rot, it doesn't work as well. And for some of those, it won't work hardly at all. And that's when we start getting into the other classes of medications. So you're really going to be hard pressed to utilize penicillin for a lot of the things that you're going to experience on your farm. And that's where the LA200 tends to jump in. Then you've got Nuflor, which is another class of antibiotics, and then you've got things like Draxin, which are another class as well. And along with all of these antibiotics also comes their half-life. How long are they active? So on one end of the spectrum, we've got things like penicillin that aren't active very long. Then we get into our Nuflor and our La200, which are somewhat active. You would have to redose after a couple days, and then we get into our our Draxin, which is a long acting and only usually requires one shot. So the nuts and bolts of it is different bacteria respond differently to different antibiotics. So good question. When we talk about antibiotic resistance, the problem is that over time these bacteria become resistant to it, and then you're just running into issues where they're not responding, and we're having to come out with bigger and stronger antibiotics to deal with them. So good question. Thank you very much. Danville, Indiana. Jason, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Vets Grow Fuzzy Butt Farm. Ready for tomorrow? Doing your CDTs for nannies and kids, weights, probiotics, and FAMACHA. Good deal. We like to bundle our cares. We like to put our stuff together. That way, when we're out there and we're handling them, um, we don't like to be out there handling them any more than necessary. So, we'll generally tend to bundle our vaccinations. We'll generally tend to bundle our tail docking and our ear tagging. We did something a little bit different this year. We started paint branding our animals. So we were paint branding our moms and paint branding our babies with a number on the side so we could see who belongs to who instead of ear tagging them right off the bat, because it just seems like my most expensive babies every year find a way to rip their ear tag out, especially those darn goats. They just love to stick their heads anywhere where where it's not supposed to be, and those ear tags can get hooked on things and ripped out, and nobody likes that. When it comes to the ears of your goats, having that little flip on the end of the ear, it's not a deal breaker. Some people go really bananas about this. We've seen some of our show folks will actually cut a part of that ear off of them. They may grab that bend and rip it, and then splint it. I don't do that for a little flip in the end of the ear. What I will treat is if the ear is folded in half. So when you look at the different associations, they may discredit you for having a folded ear. They may disqualify you altogether. Thinking about the Boer Goat Association. If you ever do have a goat kid that comes out and has an ear that's folded in half, not the little flip on the end, but folded in half, it's a very easy fix for you, but you have to do it early. So, what I would tell you to do is, I would tell you to lay that ear out as flat as you can and put a piece of cardboard behind it and trace that ear on the cardboard. Cut it out and then do make a duplicate of that. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to make a little ear sandwich. So you would take that piece of cardboard, put it behind the ear, flatten the ear out, put it on top of it, put the other piece of cardboard on there, and just wrap it in Coban. And Coban is like that elastic wrap that kind of sticks to itself, and you would just wrap that ear in Coban. I like to make my cardboard cutouts a little bit slightly bigger than the ear. That way, I'm not pinching the ear accidentally when I'm wrapping that. But you just wrap it up and you just leave it hang on there. And we'll usually leave ours hang on there for about a week. Take it off, check it, see how they're doing, and then it usually requires about a week longer. But you can easily correct that ear fold. You just have to be proactive and you have to really go after it early. The other thing you're really going to want to watch for with your goat's ears is for frostbite. They can freeze, and generally, if they freeze, it's gonna fall off, and then you're gonna have all kinds of other issues. So, just something for you to keep in mind. Vets Grow Fuzzy Butt Farm says he used to live in southern Indiana. Oh, okay, no kidding. Well, good deal. All right. Hey, Brian, what's going on? Nice to see you, Brian. Brian, you've been with us for a long time, haven't you? I think like since I started. I don't recall when I started posting YouTube videos. I think it was 2018, something like that. It was an accident. People ask me all the time. They're like, uh, how'd you get started in YouTube? And I'm like, it was an accident. We had customers that were asking us the same thing all the time, which I don't mind. I don't mind answering the questions. As you guys know, I spend a lot of time answering your questions online. Um, but I just figured, well, it's easier if I make a video. So I just made a video and I uploaded it, and then everything just went bananas. And now, it is what it is. So I had to teach myself how to video edit and how to do all that stuff. I didn't even have a Facebook account. It was a mess. And it was funny that I did something I thought was going to save me time, but in the end, it actually ended up taking more time. So what are you going to do? So shortage of Bosi and Musi, and what is this stuff? Well, Bosi, as most of you know, most of you sheep and goat folks know, it's a mixture of selenium and vitamin E, and a lot of people will use it for muscle weakness, white muscle disease process, and things like that. So when people are getting babies that are suffering from a selenium or a vitamin E deficiency, so white muscle disease would be the baby's either suffering from selenium, vitamin E, or both. And the baby's unable to get up and move and may have profound muscle weakness, things like that. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is this also affects cardiac health. So the selenium and vitamin E is necessary for good heart health as well. And so if you get a really, really bad level, you can suffer from they can suffer from this white muscle disease. So in some areas that are naturally low in selenium, that may only have their animals out on pasture, especially for you folks, it's very important for you to make sure that you're giving your animals a good quality mineral. We always advise to give as much selenium, as high of selenium as you legally can, that's in your feed mix or in your mineral mix. But there is a time and a place for the BOC to be used. Unfortunately, there's a national shortage, and there's no end in sight currently for when that's going to be back on the market. So, if you are suffering from a situation where you think you need BOC, or you think you're suffering from a vitamin E or a selenium deficiency, the best thing you can do is contact your local veterinarian and hope that they have some. The best way to avoid this is to make sure that your ewes and your does are getting good quality nutrition prior to delivering those babies. And when we talked with Woody Lane, when we did our interview with Woody Lane, he was talking about selenium deficiency. And he was saying, back in the 60s and back in the early 70s, they used to always say, if you don't want to have these problems, you need to buy your hay from out west. Well, they didn't realize that the driving force behind this was that hay they were getting from out west was high in selenium, and they were bringing it into selenium deficient areas, and those animals were taking that selenium in. Selenium is one of those things that is regulated, and the reason that it's regulated is once upon a time they figured out that if you gave somebody a monstrously high level of selenium over an extended period of time, it could potentially cause cancer. So you know what happened? The government got in and they regulated it. So that's why the selenium is actually regulated. So selenium and vitamin E work together. They're like partners. Selenium helps vitamin E. Vitamin E is a very strong, what we call antioxidant. And we are not going to get into oxidation and all of those things, but uh, vitamin E is an antioxidant. And in short terms, when vitamin E tries to help uh, do its job as an antioxidant, it becomes oxidized itself, and then selenium is able to free it up and allow it to work again. So they're like partners that look out for each other. So that's why anytime you're giving selenium and vitamin E, they're usually given together because they work together better in pairs. All right. So home remedies needed for pregnancy, toxemia, ketosis. I live remote. So this is a tough one. Um, the first thing that you need to uh, verify is that you're dealing with pregnancy, toxemia slash ketosis, and you're not dealing with hypocalcemia. So they can present themselves in similar ways. So essentially, what's going on in the pregnancy toxemia ketosis? So what's going on in the pregnancy toxemia and ketosis is that something has happened with that ewe or that doe where they are no longer able to get enough food into their system to maintain, and their body starts burning their fat stores for energy, kind of like you hear about with people on the keto diet. And this can lead them into a downward spiral and they can die. So hypocalcemia can present itself in similar way. So to determine if you're dealing with ketosis or if you're dealing with hypocalcemia, you could move that ewe or that doe into a dark area of a barn, or you can even take their ear and close over their eye with it and get yourself a flashlight. And basically, when you remove that ear and you expose that eye to light, you're going to look to see if the pupil constricts, if you get pupil dilation and constriction, if it's working properly. So you notice when you go to the doctor's office how they're shining the light in your eyes and they're looking to see what your pupil response is to that light. When you start to see sluggish responses, it tells us that we're probably dealing with some type of an electrolyte imbalance. And in this case, we're talking about calcium. So if you cover that eye to where it's really, really dark with a rag or their ear, you move it away and you're still shining the light in there, and you don't see a pupillary response to that light, then chances are you may be dealing with hypocalcemia, which is not enough calcium. And as far as, and that would require you to probably call your vet and get some calcium, calcium gluconate, something like that, where they could come out and start an IV and do that. You can try oral calcium drenches, things like that. They don't work as well. You can also give an injection into the peritoneum, which is the abdominal cavity. With some medications that have calcium in there as well, but that's kind of a heavy duty thing that I would probably tell you uh, you would need to do some research in a vet manual or something like that if you have no vets in your area. As far as quick energy for an animal that is suffering from ketosis, there are some over-the-counter stuff that you can get at Tractor Supply, your feed stores, things like that. They have quick energy availability in them, and you can orally drench them. Things like propylene glycol, things like that, to where you can drench them. I think it's called Power Punch is one of them. Um, so Generally, what we see cause this is the animals get a major change in feed in late pregnancy. Either the producer switches up hay on them or something like that to where they go off of feed for a few days, or maybe they start getting an illness to where they go off of feed for a few days. But it's generally associated with a swing in their feed intake, and it traps them in this cycle to where they start getting sick. And unfortunately, when they get sick, they don't take in enough food because they don't want to eat, and then they don't take in enough food, and then this problem just starts to spiral and get out of control. So we always want to avoid any major changes in diet, even changing up your hay in with your animals. If you raise sheep and goats, if you've been doing it for a while, you may have experienced to where you bring in some new hay and you give it to them, and now all of a sudden they don't want to eat it because they don't like it because it doesn't smell the same or whatever, and it takes them a couple days to get going on it again. This would be a really, really bad idea to do during late pregnancy, because we don't want those ewes or those does going off feed for any period of time. We want to keep everything par for the course. So I would look for any of those kind of oral with the propylene glycol and things like that in it to give them some quick energy. That would be the best that I could tell you. There are tons and tons of other things out there that can be done, but they all require a vet. They all require a prescription medication. And it's not going to do me any good to go at length into that with you, because if you don't have access to it, you don't have access to it. So best of luck to you. Check to see if you're dealing with hypocalcemia or if you're dealing with the ketosis, and kind of move forward from there. We do have a video that's out dealing specifically with hypocalcemia and ketosis. You can just look that up on YouTube. It would probably go in further depth than what I did just now. Just do a simple search in YouTube for Linessa Farms hypocalcemia or Linessa Farms ketosis, and it'll come up. If you have any further questions, reach out to us via email, and we'll be happy to work with you to try to help you out. All right. Brian says he doesn't know how long he's been with us either. So, yeah, it's fair enough. It's been a long time. All right. We raise over 80% ram lambs per year. Why can't we raise ewe lambs? Tried numerous rams and different fleshings, etc. Always produce ram lambs. That's tough. It could be the way that you're breeding them. There's so many factors that go into this. So there are different types of sperm. There's X sperm, there's Y sperm. Some of the boy sperm is smaller and it travels faster. Girl sperm is a little bit bigger and it travels a little slower, but it lives longer. So it could be that. It could be the genetics of the ewes that you have. It could be the genetics of the rams that you're getting. It could be, yeah, tons and tons of stuff. If I knew the answer to that one, there is anecdotal evidence out there that, when I say anecdotal, it's like, well, people's best guess of what works. It's like saying, well, your first time moms generally tend to have singles, and then if they have singles for a second year in a row, then they're almost always going to have singles. Um, I'll agree with that to a certain degree. Um, if your ewes have been flushed really hard and you go through all the steps possible to get them in estrus and ready to breed, I personally find that we have more males. Why do I think this is? Well, I think they're ovulating, the egg is there, it's ready to go. Those boy sperm tend to be a little bit faster. Perhaps it's because they're getting to that egg a little bit faster, and that's why I end up with more males. Again, I'm not a geneticist, and all the information that I read, it's all just kind of like, you know, nobody really seems to understand exactly why that's happening. There's a genetic component, there's a timing component, there's a health component. There's so many things that go into it. I don't know. Are your ewes, or excuse me, yeah, you said ewes. Are your ewes um, out of the same genetic pool? Are most of your ewes, do they share the same genetic lineage? That would be interesting to see. And have you brought in ewes from outside of that gene pool and seen if it's the same thing with them? So if you get a chance, let me know. All right, Jason Ford, we just bought a selenium vitamin E gel off the shelf at local Rural King. Yeah, there are other selenium vitamin E supplements that are out there. There's um, things that are made for other species even that'll have a vitamin E and a selenium um, content in there that you can use. There are other avenues other than the injectable. Um, I think the holdup and the hang up with some people is when they're dealing with a severe disease process to where the animal is really, really down and really, really not doing anything. They want that quick pick me up, that quick fix, which is obviously going to be through the injection. When we look at the speed of how quick a medication enters the body, that's when we're getting into the difference between, you got IV, which is the fastest, then we have intramuscular, and then we have subcutaneous, which is under the skin, and then we have oral. So we move from super fast, no turning back, uh, all the way up to oral, which tends to be the slowest, but not always. Uh, but generally speaking, that's the way that works. But yeah, just for a general supplement to do and to have on hand, yeah, I think a paste works fine, especially if you don't have any other options, right? All right, Brenda. She said she is good, in good condition. It is cold here, -30. Oh goodness gracious! Yeah, that is. So stress from stress from that temperature, it's got to be hurting you a little as well. All right, we've got a question here. All right. Hi, I'm using Vita First Care Oral Drench instead of the vitamin E and selenium shot. Seems to work better for me. Okay. Yeah, and as long as what you're using is working for you, and they're getting what they need, you know, that's great, man. If it works for you, then just keep doing what you're doing. Absolutely. Is the vitamin E supplement from Linessa Farms online store a good stand for BOSI, or is that something that would have needed to be added to the use at flushing time? So, BOSI is, again, it's that mix of selenium and vitamin E. We do sell a vitamin E supplement on our website, but that is just strictly the vitamin E. It is good to utilize during your flushing time. There is some evidence to support that it helps them. It helps during the fertilization process and helps to keep them healthy and helps that initial that initial egg sperm joint that forms this little itty bitty uh, zygote. It helps to for them to maintain it, and it helps it to embed itself into the uterine wall and all of that stuff. So it is a good thing to use for overall health, but it's not a suitable substitute for BOSI. BOSI is just the right mix of selenium and vitamin E, and just giving vitamin E on its own would not be enough. Again, those problems with white muscle disease and things like that they can be vitamin E only, they can be selenium only, or they could be both. And generally speaking, we're usually dealing more with either a both or a selenium issue. Good question, though. Thank you. If you get new animals and aren't sure if they had their CD and T, can you vaccinate, or is that dangerous? So that's a good question. So we would always want to ask the producers when we bring the animals onto when we're purchasing animals, if we can, we always want to ask the producer, have you vaccinated these animals against, whatever, and see what they tell you. When in doubt, you can always revaccinate them and just make that your annual vaccination date. You're not going to run into any issues when it comes to revaccinating with CD and T. Um, we do utilize boosters from time to time. So, do animals really need to be? So, let's talk about annual boosters for an example. Do they really need to be given a booster every year? No, um, they don't. So they don't need to be, because they are still healthy, they are still covered. The reason that we're giving these boosters to our ewes and our does, those 4, 6, 8 weeks out from delivering their babies, is because we want to boost that immune response in their body to make sure that they're passing as much of that immunity onto their offspring as possible. So that immunity is passed a couple different ways. Some immunity is passed to the baby when it's in mom's womb. The other bit of immunity is also passed to the baby through mom's colostrum. So by giving a ewe or a doe an annual booster, we're actually we're heightening that immune response, and we're making it more readily available to get passed on. So, unless you bought that animal, going back to your question, unless you bought that animal and it was vaccinated like the day you got it, I wouldn't recommend vaccinating it again the next day. But if there's been any period of time, even weeks, between, I would say you're better off vaccinating them than not vaccinating them. Now, I'm using specifically CD and T, Clostridium type C and D, and tetanus as the example here. There would be specific types of vaccinations that you would not want to do that with. So with maybe some of our live vaccines, some of the abortion vaccines, things like that. But as far as CD&T is concerned, yes, you can do that. So the next question that I get asked is, well, if I have a ram that is intact and on my farm that I'm keeping for breeding, does he need an annual booster? My unpopular answer to that question is no. I would revaccinate him maybe every 4 to 5 years. I would not be giving him an annual booster. I don't see the need for it. So in humans, when it comes to tetanus, we're good for 10. When it comes to these animals, I think the 4 to 5 for your rams is sufficient enough. Again, the reason we're revaccinating those ewes is to give them a boost to make sure that that baby is getting what it needs. So hopefully that answers your question. If I bring a new animal back to my farm, ideally I want to quarantine it. I want to put it off by itself. I want to watch it. I want to check it out. I want to make sure it's healthy. I want to run fecals on it, see where the worms are at in it, see if it's got coccidia. I want to make sure that it's up to date on all of its vaccinations, it's healthy, and everything's good. So I want to do that before I cut them loose, because I don't want them dumping all kinds of parasites on my farm. I don't want them dumping coccidia on my farm. I don't want them out there if they're not vaccinated. I don't want them out there if they've got hoof rot. So lots and lots of things that you need to check, and just take your time and do a once over from the nose to the tail. Check them out, check them over, run some fecals, get them up to date on their vaccinations, and make sure they're healthy before you cut them loose with the rest of your flock or herd. Hi, Brenda. Thank you. I appreciate you and all your videos. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here, and thanks for asking the questions. I appreciate it. All right, Brian, I'm dealing with prolapse with a few of my ewes. Yeah, they are overweight. What would be the best and safest way to get them to lose weight? Well, why are they overweight, Brian? That would be the first thing that I would ask you. Well, the first thing I would ask you is, are they bloated or are they overconditioned? So, and that's a mistake that people make. You'll go to someone's farm and you'll talk to them and they'll be like, look at that goat, she's super fat. And then you go out there and you actually put your hands on her and she's not fat at all. She's just super bloated. She's got hay belly, she's got all that gas and everything in there. But when you feel over the ribs, she's not at all. Um, I know you well enough to know that I know you personally well enough to know that when you say she's overweight, she's actually overweight. So we'll move on from there. So the next question is okay, why is she overweight? Well, you know, doing any kind of drastic changes in diet when it comes to late gestation, late pregnancy is, a recipe for disaster. So anything we're going to do, any moves that we're going to make, we want to make them very slowly and very methodically. So, if it was the middle of summer and they weren't pregnant and you were needing to cut them back a little bit, I may be, and you said, oh, I'm feeding them 2 pounds of grain per head per day. I may be inclined to tell you, just take the grain away and just keep them on their hay and do what you're doing, and everything will be fine. I would never in a million years tell you to do that with a pregnant ewe or a pregnant doe. So I would tell you, you may want to start limiting your hay. I don't want you going below like 1 flake per head per day, but you could work your way down to that. You could work your way down. If, let's say, you were feeding 2 pounds of grain per head per day, you could slowly start to work your way down from that as well. But again, you're going to have to do this in baby steps and in baby increments. And unfortunately, anytime we're doing any major changes to diet in late gestation, we're setting ourselves up for problems like we talked about earlier, with ketosis and other things like that. So you need to be extremely cautious. The most important thing that you can do is you can kind of take a step back and you can look at it from a 30,000 foot view, and you can say, this is what I did this year, and I'm going to change it so this doesn't happen again, that, you know, uh, next year. And that was some changes that we made here on our farm this year. And I spoke about this last week, but I will bring it up again and say that we're not huge grain feeders by any means, but we do utilize grain on our farm. And in prior years, we slowly increase the quality of our flock every year as we do our culling, as we decide who we're getting rid of and who we're going to keep. We slowly start getting rid of stock and we're getting better stock. And you'll notice that, you do that for 10 years and you get some pretty good stock. So we're getting better stock in with better genetics, better uh, feed to body weight ratios, things like that, and we're getting bigger babies. And so what we were experiencing is we couldn't continue feeding the same that we were feeding years ago. And that is, we were getting stuck babies. We were getting babies that are too darn big. It was hard on the mom. It was hard on the baby. We were ending up with all kinds of problems. And so what we did this year was we really, really tapered back the amount of grain that we were feeding. As a matter of fact, some of our ewes and some of our does aren't getting any grain at all. But they are getting a very good quality hay. And they are getting a very good quality mineral. So we're sure that they're getting everything that they need. So we're giving them everything that they need. But by taking that grain away, what we've been left with now is our babies are smaller. Um, and it's fine. They still have the same genetic potential that they had, even if they would have came out a pound heavier. They're still going to, in the end, they're still going to grow up to be what they were going to be, even if they were larger when they came out. We're just easing the burden on ourselves because we're keeping that birth weight low. So it's easier on mom because it's easier for her to deliver. It's easier on baby because it's less time in the birth canal that they're getting all the compression on them. We're not pulling babies. Life is a lot better here now. Um, so we were able to do that because we have very good quality hay, and very reliable content in our hay. I know that I can go get more of this hay tomorrow, next week, a month, whatever. So that's something that you have to consider as well. So moving forward and looking at the situation that you're in now, um, you're not in a good position now. You're going to have to make micro moves to get down to where you need to be, monitor body condition, monitor all that stuff, and keep them healthy. But looking forward to next year, um, that may be something for you to consider. If you are in a more grain heavy feed, you may want to slightly taper that back a little bit and maybe lean a little bit more towards your hay and a little bit less towards your grain. Now, you can run into this. We see the same problem when it comes to hay. We see individuals that have like beautiful, high quality, full of legumes. They've got clover, alfalfa, all this stuff. They got beautiful round bales, and they'll put a round bale out there and they'll let the ewes and the does eat on that round bale 24/7, and they can run into the same exact problems that you're running into. So I'm not poo pooing on the grain folks. I'm just poo pooing on the overfeeding in general. And it's something that you really need to be cautious about. Overfeeding is bad for their milk production. It's bad for the baby. It's bad for mom. It's hard to breed them when they're fat. Uh, they get fat pockets over their udder, and their milk production sucks. It's just a disaster all around. So, you know, I know you're heading in the right direction because you're getting better every year. just one more thing for you to think about. If you ever figure it all out, man, let me know. I'd love to hear, because I just, I'm like you, buddy. Every year I learn a new trick or I figure something out. We have a very good, network, and I hope you guys do too. And I know I've told you guys in the past. I say guys. I'm from Indiana. I apologize. So, guys and gals, all inclusive here. I always tell you guys, reach out and get different resources from lots of different places. I am not interested in having a cult following. I am not the end all be all of things. Some of the things that I tell you may work for you, some of the things that I tell you may not. It's important for you to get out there and get as much valuable, good, quality information that you can, absorb what you can, use what you can, and get rid of the rest. If you ever meet anybody that tells you, like, well, all you got to do, we had an individual post on one of our videos a couple days ago, talking about worms, and she said, all you got to do. And I thought, oh, because I didn't know what she was going to say, but usually when someone starts with that, it's not good. And she said, all you got to do is watch your nutrition, and you don't got to worry about worms. Okay, well, we'll try that and see how that works for you. Is nutrition important? Absolutely. Nutrition is important. Absolutely, it's important for health and for reproduction and all kinds of things, but it's not the end all be all. You can be very healthy and get a wound and you can get tetanus. The tetanus doesn't care if you're healthy or if you're not. You can be extremely healthy and get out and eat a bag of feed and Clostridium can kill you. You can be very healthy and have all kinds of things happen. So it's not the nutrition is very, very, very important, but it's not the end all be all, because we're not looking at the big picture. We got to look at that whole animal. We got to look at the whole picture with that animal. And there's a lot that goes into it. So, if you come in to see me and I tell and you say, uh, I'm here to see you. What do I need to do to stay healthy? And I say, all you got to do is make sure that your diet is good. I'm not addressing anything else about you. You may have high cholesterol. You may have a history of heart disease in your family. You may have a history of cancer in your family. You may smoke cigarettes. You may drink like a fish. I don't know, because I'm just looking at one thing. Well, if you smoke like a chimney, you drink like a fish, you got high cholesterol and a history of heart disease, is diet important? Yes, it is important. Is that the answer to all of your problems? Absolutely not. So try not to funnel yourself down into some of these groups that are out there that they tell you all you got to do is this one thing or that one thing and it's going to fix all your problems. That's complete. I can't say it here, but you got to look at them just like you got to look at the whole picture. You got to look at the whole person. So you got to look at the whole animal. And there's a lot that goes into that. So that's all I got to say about that. Jamie's here. Hi, Jamie. She finally made it on for a live stream. I'm shocked. What can I say? So Jamie is on Linessa Farms Tac Box. She is one of our moderators, and she fields a ton of questions. So uh, if you're not on Linessa Farms Tac Box, it's kind of like this. Only you can put messages all the time, and you can ask questions, and we do our best to answer it. And if we don't know, we probably know somebody that we can get out and ask. That was the other thing that I was going to say is, when you guys ask me questions, somebody said something a couple weeks ago. They're like, "Man, you seem to know everything." No, no, I have a ton of people that I talk to. So behind the scenes, somebody will ask me a question, and if I don't know the answer, I'll reach out to one of the many people that I talk to. So when you see Linessa Farms, what you're really seeing is you're seeing me, Jamie, my family, her family, Rick Adams, Aaron Jennings, Wayne Belden, Ray. I'm hurt that you're not on here. There's a ton of people. There's a ton of people. I seem to be the guy that does the talking, but the reality is I don't know everything, and I spend a ton of time researching and reading things that is really boring to try to give you the right answer. But no, by no means I don't know everything, and you'll never know everything too. The best thing you can do is just do your best and go from there. Jamie says Vita First is also in back order now as well. Oh, jeez. Oh, man. Jimmy Carr. Is there anyone raising sheep biblically without medications? Yeah. Yeah, there's people out there that raise sheep with no medications whatsoever. Um, you can do it. You're going to deal with some things that are going to pop up from time to time. You may lose an animal from time to time, and then we get into the deep weeds of, okay, what are you considering a medication? So, I'll have people that'll say, well, I give this and I give this and I give this, but I don't give medications. And they're giving herbals. And, some of those herbals come with all kinds of problems with them as well. So if you're talking about just plain old mineral, hay, water, yeah, yeah, there's people that do it. And depending on your situation, you're going to have a learning curve that you're going to have to do. But yeah, we have tons of people that do non-medicated. We have some products that we sell that are specifically non-medicated for individuals that want to do it. Your big medications that you're going to see are medications for worming, medications for vaccinations, medications as far as antibiotics are concerned, and those are going to be your big three. Um, so there are some hurdles that you're going to have to jump to get there, but and you're going to, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, you're going to lose some animals. I mean, if an animal gets pneumonia and you're not going to give them antibiotics, then yeah, they're going to die. But that's just part of it. That's just what we go through. It's no different than if you look at the life expectancy of individuals and the mortality rate of individuals in the United States prior to penicillin rolling out in the mid 20th century. There's a lot of dead babies. There's a lot of dead people. There's a lot of people that died. And the mortality rate went way, way down and life expectancy went up. It's just par for the course. I can tell you that sitting here right now telling you, if it wasn't for medications, I would not have lived this long. I had spinal meningitis when I was 4. I would have died. I have a daughter that's a type 1 diabetic. She'd be dead. I can go through a whole list of my family members, and that was just the way we lived our lives. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with choosing to go medication free for whatever reason you decide that you want to do that. You just have to be realistic about it. I would not discredit you for doing that. I hope no one else would either. It's a choice that you make. So we always want you to have your animal welfare in the front of your mind, and you just do the best that you can, and you go from there. Good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Deborah, hi Deborah. Thought maybe an omega-3 issue, too much oils and fats, so changing flushing systems to all alfalfa products. No difference. Thinking now it is water. Um, Again, it's hard. It's hard to say. Um, I that's a long conversation. Um, so shoot me an email and kind of let me know. Shoot me an email. Let me know what you've been doing. I'll put my email address here so you guys have it if you need it. So it's timothy.ventrolo@linessafarms.com. And you guys can send me an email there if you've got questions and kind of let me know what's going on in the background. And it'll allow me to answer your questions a little bit better. Okay. Have you changed your streaming schedule? I just happened to catch you. Yeah, I get on here when I can. Last weekend we were on Sunday night or Sunday morning, and I think it worked out it was too difficult for some people. A lot of people were at church. And so I changed it to just in the evening whenever I can squeeze it in. I've been busy. It's lambing and kidding season and work and everything else. So I'm trying, Jack. Hang in there, buddy. We'll try to get it down to an easier one. Plus, we didn't have Monday Night Football. I was going to do it last night. I was going to do it Sunday night, and then I'm like, it's the playoffs, and I'm like, I can't compete with football. I'm not that good. So we changed it since there's no Monday Night Football. All right. Here we go. Hello, I'm thinking about breeding my boar goats to a Kiko buck because the boars have so much parasite and hoof problems. What are your thoughts about doing that? Well, I think anytime that you pigeonhole yourself into a specific breed, I think you're going to run into more problems. And that's the same problem that we run into with purebred dogs. It's the same problem that we run into any kind of purebred livestock, is because we lose some of what they refer to as the hybrid vigor. Anytime you're bringing, there's a reason that mutts tend to be healthier than a pure breed dog, generally speaking. And that's because you have what's called hybrid vigor. When you bring together genetics that haven't been brought together for a considerable amount of time, you have this synergistic effect that generally tends to lead to a healthier animal. And then we can get into the deep weeds of why that works. And that's because of positive dominant and recessive genetic traits and all kinds of things like that. If you are raising a specific breed of livestock, which I can appreciate, you may raise Dorpers or you may raise Boer goats, and that's your bread and butter, and you show them, and that's what you do. If you start to develop a problem, the best thing that you can do is try to identify that problem and try to work it out of your flock. And that would be where you'd really need to do your homework, where you're getting your particularly your males from, but also your females. And you would need to kind of work through that together to get yourself where you need to go. Now, is there anything wrong with bringing, if you're not really dead set on a specific breed, is there anything wrong with bringing a Kiko in and putting it on a boar? No, absolutely not. We don't show boar goats, but we have boar goats. And the problem that I was experiencing with boar goats years ago was I thought their milk production really stunk. So I was having really big, healthy babies, but then the moms weren't really able to feed them as well because their bag was really small. So what I did was for a couple years, I bred in some dairy goats. I bred in I bred in all kinds of stuff. I bred in some alpines. I bred in some alpine crosses. And then once I bred them in and I got my female stock built up to where that milking genetic trait was really, really good, I started to work them back out. And then over the past few years, I've kind of worked a boar buck in on them. So if you were to come to my farm and see most of my does now are probably 1/5 dairy, 4/5 boar, and then I'm breeding a boar buck on them. Now, of course, I have to be careful because I can breed that positive trait I've bred in them right back out. Um, but that's where culling comes into effect as well. Culling is very important. Again, are you looking at the whole animal? Are you looking at their milk production? Are you looking at their kidding rates, feed conversion ratio? All of those things need to go into that culling, and you need to make the hard decisions to get rid of the ones that aren't fitting into your program and perhaps bring other ones in. You don't ever want to go cheap on your males. I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make. If you're buying a buck or if you're buying a ram, that's going to be a lot of your genetics. So I've seen people in the past that, we'll just use arbitrary numbers as an example. They'll spend $400 or $500 on a breeding ewe or a breeding doe, but then you tell them that a buck or a ram's going to cost them $700 and they kind of snub their nose, they kind of turn up their nose at you and you're like, this thing is going to be 50% of your genetics. So there's a lot to be said for the male that you're bringing in. Great situation is if you know where that male came from and you see what kind of genetics he came from. What was his mom like? Did his mom have the traits that you're looking for in a doe? That's something that you would want to look at as well. So it's tough. But no, by no means whatsoever would I be opposed to anybody trying to crossbreed some animals to get some of that hybrid vigor and to get themselves where they need to be. I'm not telling anybody to go out there and lie. I'm not telling you to bring in something and then sell those offspring as something that they're not. But for overall health and productivity of your flock or your herd, yeah, I think that's a great idea. So keep us posted with that, Susan, and let us know how things go for you. Brian, my ewes are overweight. I keep them on dry a lot year round, and I cut my own hay, and it's nothing very special. So the way I feel as they need more, so I've been feeding a 18% feed. Yeah, that's way too high, Brian, for them. I would tell you maybe something in the 12%, maybe 14% would be tippy top. So I think the 18% is a little bit too high for them. So that might be something that you want to look at. You don't have to. An 18% feed is not necessarily nutritionally better than a 12% feed. You can get the same minerals, vitamins, and everything else that you need in both of them. You're dealing with protein. So if you're dealing with them being overweight, if you can get the same quality feed in a lower protein percentage, that would be what I would tell you to do. So yeah, that's just too darn high, buddy. I would The only time I even consider feeding anything 18% is for like club lambs. If I'm feeding out a club lamb for show, and even then I've got to be pretty cautious about it because I can blow them up. But hey, uh, man, you live and learn, right? So I could write a large volume of books of things that I've done that in hindsight I wouldn't do again, but that's just par for the course. So to me, it sounds like you kind of already knew what was going on. Um, so sometimes it's good you just bounce it against somebody and see what they have to say. And yeah, I would say it's just too darn high protein. Good night, Tim. Hello. When is the best time to give vitamin E selenium to a pregnant ewe or lamb? Um, so the best time to make sure that they're getting what they need is during the entire course of the pregnancy, all the way up through weaning. So when we start thinking about making sure that they're getting everything that they need as far as selenium content, vitamin E, and all of that, that's going to be a process that we're going to go through pre-flushing, into flushing, through early stage of pregnancy, all the way up through until they deliver that baby. If we're giving mom what she needs as far as any of these nutrients are concerned, it could be manganese, zinc, cobalt, copper, selenium, any of these things. If we're giving her what she needs in a good quality, either free choice mineral or through her feed, during the pregnancy process, then we shouldn't have to worry too much about that with that baby. Most of these imbalances, most of these electrolyte imbalances, mineral deficiencies, things like these are not something that you can quickly rectify. It's very, very difficult. And the veterinarians will tell you, it's heavy duty stuff. When you've got an animal that's down because it doesn't have enough calcium, when you've got an animal that's down because it doesn't have enough selenium, vitamin E, whatever, fill in the blank, uh, it's very difficult for them to do it. Then you're talking about having the vet come out, you're talking about IVs and things like that. So that's what I would tell you is good free choice mineral that has everything that you need, good quality feed, and think of that pregnancy as you preparing that animal to have and support that baby. That's the way I look at my ewes and my does. I'm preparing them and keeping them healthy so they can take care of that baby and get that baby to weaning without me having to give anything. I personally, I don't give Bosi to my babies. I don't need to. I think I'm able to give enough to the moms. Uh, before that they have the baby. So that's what I would tell you with that. There is no magic time to give it to where it's necessarily going to guarantee you. You're better off taking the long route and going that way. If I had to give selenium to, let's say I had to give Bosi to a baby, um, I would give that to that baby immediately. If they were displaying signs and symptoms of white muscle disease, I would give that to them immediately. And it is a very, very small dose. When it comes to Bosi, it's a weight-based dose, and it's going to be very, very small. Somewhere probably in the neighborhood of 0.25 milliliters to 0.50 milliliters. It's going to be a whiff of it. And that's because you can very easily overdose them on that. So, just something for you to keep in mind. While we're on the topic of weight, I do get a lot of questions from individuals that need me to help them do the math to figure out how much of something to give their babies. And I don't mind doing that. If you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't understand how in the heck to convert, I do have some videos out there that show you how to do conversions, but even still, sometimes it's heavy duty stuff. And if you haven't done it in a long time, or if you've never done it, you can always reach out to us on the tack box, or you can shoot me an email and I can help you figure out those conversions. Most of these things are going to be weight based when it comes to your antibiotics, when it comes to your wormers, when it comes to your drugs like Bosi. All of these things are weight based and weight driven. Even Decox, Rumensin, Bovatec, these additives for coccidia, totrazeril, all of these things, they're all weight based. So I had an individual that emailed me last week and she said, how much of this mineral do I need to put in my animal's feed bowl every night when I feed him? And I'm like, I can't answer that question. I need to know how much weight of feed you're putting in there before I can tell you how much of this to put in there. Some of these drugs, Decox, as an example, or Rumensin, or the vitamin E supplement that we saw this, it ain't winging it. Like, you can't, I'm not telling you that there's not a little bit of wiggle room. There is a little bit of wiggle room, but it's not enough that you can just like grab a handful and throw it in there and hope for the best. You really need to get some kind of a plan down, to where you know what dosage you're giving these animals. That is important. Okay. Goat semen, 1/2 cc straws at concentration of 130 million, 45% motility, was a postmortem collection, have failed to create embryos or pregnancy so far. Does this seem like a lost cause? Speaking to other producers locally, AI failure rate seems high regardless. Any thoughts? Um, yeah. My question would be, is it the same person doing all of your is it the same person doing all of your work for you? Um, and is it the same person handling the semen for you guys as far as having these problems? That would be interesting. Does it seem like a lost cause? Man, that's a tough one. 45% motility. Uh, that's a tough one. Um, Jamie would probably have some insight on this. Aaron Jennings would probably have some insight on this. If you're not a member of the TAC box, this is not my specialty, per se. If you're not a member of the TAC box on Facebook, hop on there and post this question, and that will allow me to more easily share this with some of the guys that do know a lot better, and gals that do know a lot better, and we will get back with you. Um, I don't want to go as far as to tell you it's a lost cause. However, um, I don't know enough to tell you either way. So post that or email me, and I will get an answer for you. Okay. Thank you for the question. That was a good question. Just something I don't deal with enough. Smooth move, raising Icelandics, and they are digging holes into the pasture hillsides. Why some holes are big enough for them to lay down in, but most are not. They could be. What are you doing for your mineral? I'm wondering if they're chasing salt, or if there's something, or if there's roots, or if there's anything down in there that they're trying to get at. Um, that would be something that I'm asking. That would be interesting to know. Um, Other than that, I couldn't tell you. There's Now you're going to get a wide variety of answers on this. Some people are going to tell you like, oh, they know what they need and they're looking for it and they're trying to dig to get minerals and whatever. Anecdotal evidence, like maybe not. Maybe they're just digging because they like digging. Maybe there's something down there that smells good to them and they're going after it. Uh, I had a friend that he swore up and down his goats were digging holes because they needed minerals, and he had a free choice mineral, and we were feeding him free choice mineral, and he swore up and down. He's like, they're digging these holes because they need more minerals. And then we actually went out and we looked, and they were digging down on the sassafras trees. On every time they were digging a hole, they were digging down and chewing on these sassafras roots. They just liked the way that they tasted, and they could smell them. It was very pungent smell. So, eh, if you're giving them a good free choice mineral that it gives them everything that they need, it's difficult for me to be able to tell you exactly what it is that they're chasing or why they're doing it. I'm not overly familiar with the Icelandic breed. I don't believe this is not a habit of theirs that I've heard of, but it doesn't mean that I know for sure. So, good question. I would like to know about the mineral though. Doing more butchering videos. Our last butchering video didn't do too great, and I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if we're going to do any more or not. I don't know if it's so far out of the wheelhouse of what our viewers like to watch. That's the thing. That's the hard part about making the videos is if you get too far out of the wheelhouse of what people want to see, then they just don't watch it. Um, I enjoyed our butchering video that we did. I've considered doing butchering videos on sheep and goats. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a poll on our social media and just ask the viewers if that's something that they want to watch or not. I think it's valuable and I think it's important. But on the same token, I understand why some people don't want to watch that. Of course, then you could just say, well, then just don't watch it. So we'll see. Don't know. I'll get back with you. All right. Do you keep overprotective mother goats? I've had to separate her and her babies from the rest. She fights anyone who gets close to her babies. We see this behavior much more in goats than we do in sheep, although you do see it sometimes in sheep. Um, that's a tough call. And what you really got to watch for, and as you probably know, you especially got to watch for them hurting other babies. Sometimes those babies get curious and they come up and they want to try to nurse off a mom that isn't theirs. And you obviously don't want that mom injuring those babies. If she were being overly aggressive, um, then you may have to consider it. We have a few that are pretty aggressive, and we still keep them. It seems like most of the other animals out there just learn to stay the heck away from them. But if you're in a small or confined area and they are potentially going to hurt someone, then yeah, you may not, and that's tough because I always say that my crazy moms are my best moms. And that is most definitely true. Like the moms that are stomping their feet at you and trying to get you away from their babies tend to be the most seem to be the best moms. And then we've got other ones that are just completely aloof and the baby's over screaming and they're not tending to them. And you run into issues with that too. Jamie, yeah, I was kind of hoping you were going to jump in there. So I know that you know more about that than I do. So, all right. Are you on Twitter? Yes, I am on Twitter. I think we are streaming live on Twitter right now, as a matter of fact. I feed my stock a TMR in the morning and alfalfa in the evening. Can you switch on some days as far as what time of day that you're feeding them? Yeah, and these animals are creatures of habit, and so um, I always get concerned when people make any drastic changes to their animals. It can really be detrimental to them, especially in late pregnancy. Anytime you're doing any major changes, they do not like change. Um, and these animals will go off feed if you look at some of them will if you just look at them wrong. Like used the example earlier of just simply switching the hay. Even though you got good hay, you switch from one to the other and they don't like the smell of it or the texture of it. And if you put them in a position to where those ewes or those does are going to go off feed um, for a day, you could be dealing with a potential disaster when it comes to all kinds of problems. So you always got to be careful. I'm a big fan of anytime you're making changes, you want to make changes slowly, gradually, and you want to ease everyone into it. So just something for you to consider. Unless there's a good reason for you to change the way that you're doing things, unless you can justify it, I always tell people just keep doing what you're doing. If it's working and it's not broken, you don't need to fix it. Um, just to change things up for poops and giggles is generally not a good idea. And if you need to do any drastic changes, you need to time it during your year and do those changes when it's easier to do them. Late pregnancy is not the ideal time to change things up. When you're when you're weaning your babies, it's not the time to reinvent the wheel. There's these critical stages in their development. So try to time your changes with that. So if I were to change the time of day that I'm feeding on dry lot, I may wait until the next time I bring them back to dry lot. So maybe next season after they're coming up off pasture, I may change it up if I find that the morning's not working for me. Now, I understand there's going to be times that you're going to have to make changes for whatever reason, because of health reasons or your health reasons or whatever. And I get that. And you just do the best that you can do. But just be careful when you make any kind of changes. So Jamie says white muscle disease concerns can be addressed in the last 4 weeks of gestation. Selenium deficiency, cardiac development disorders happen in the first 4 weeks of gestation. So what Tim said. Okay. Jason Ford. We are feeding good grass hay, free choice, and 12% sweet feed at 1 pound per head per day to our pregnant first time Catons. Very good. Would adding alfalfa pellets to their sweet feed aid in milk production? Probably. Um, so if you were to start adding the alfalfa pellets after delivery, um, then that would be something that could help to boost milk production and help to keep a little bit of weight on those babies, or pardon me, on those moms as they're going under the stress of having babies nurse on them. Alfalfa is a great feed. It's good in protein. I really like alfalfa pellets because they are I really like alfalfa pellets because they tend to be generally high in protein. Calcium phosphorus ratio tends to be pretty good in it. So overall, I'm a fan of the alfalfa pellets. You don't get any waste. Now you can't replace all of your hay with pellets. Just so everybody understands, they do need that roughage. They need that something to chew on, as far as some kind of hay, some kind of roughage, in order to keep their rumen cooking. You could not just switch one of these animals over to a straight pellet feed. But I think that would be an option for you to add to your 12% in order to help the milk production after they deliver. So yeah, let us know how that works out for you. Emily Hathaway. Hi, Emily. What do you consider late pregnancy? So, I personally consider late pregnancy the third trimester of pregnancy. So, the baby has essentially developed, and now we're kind of in that latter stage of development, and we're kind of in that growth, that explosive growth stage. Some medications that can cause problems during pregnancy will specifically cause problems in that early developmental stage, that maybe that first trimester, and may not have as profound effects during the third trimester. But generally, when someone's speaking and they're referring to latter pregnancy, they're generally referring to the third trimester. Now, there are specific instances regarding medications and things like that where they may be referring to, you know, 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out, and that would be a specific question that you would have to ask them based on what it is that they're talking about. But generally speaking, for me, if I say late pregnancy, I'm referring to the third trimester. Good question. Jamie, what brand alfalfa pellet do you feed? Ours always choke on it, even in the tiniest amount. Well, Jamie, you just gave me a plug. You probably didn't realize you were doing it. We actually sell, it's called Hey Buddy, and it's an alfalfa pellet. So ours is not dusty at all. But some of the alfalfa pellets that you feed, they will choke on it. Um, I don't know. I don't know why. Ours tend to do really good on it. Other brands, they don't. And when I was feeding mine, before we got into having the feed store and the company and all that stuff, uh, there was a couple different local producers in my area. One of them was Hunter Nutrition, and his was always great. And then the other one that I won't mention was always really dusty and they were choking on it. And I don't know. The difference I could tell it was how tight it was. Like our pellet is like super tightly compacted. And if you put it in water and you watch it, it takes a bit of time for it before it actually starts to really expand on you. Where I did notice the other pellet that I was having the choking problems on, when I would grab a handful of it, if I threw it in water, it was like it was just fluffing up. And I guess it was something with the milling process. So I don't know. If you want to try, I'll tell you what, Jamie, I will mail you some of our Hey Buddy and you can try it and you can let me know what happens. All right. So for an hour long live stream, I did really good. We're at 1 hour and 25 minutes. So that is it. We do have some videos coming your way, I promise. We've just been dealing with the weather here and things have been crazy. And I've been teaching with my job like crazy, and it's just been crazy. So I really do appreciate all of you guys watching. If you would consider taking time to give us a thumbs up, that's fine. I won't twist your arm about it. If you're not a member of Linessa Farms Tack Box, I would ask that you join that. I would really appreciate that as well. Thank you guys for being here. I really, really enjoy visiting with all of you, and I look forward to seeing all of you again next time.